All right, everyone, it's 4 o'clock and I want to be respectful of everyone's time and kick off. Good afternoon. My name is Blessy Thomas and I am the project director for the MBDA Care Center here in Philadelphia. If you're wondering, some of you are from the South and wondering why I'm on the line here, just to let you know, this is the first time we're doing a co-collaboration between the Philadelphia MBDA Care Center and the care centers covering the Southeast region. So some of you are probably familiar with Chiquita and Sandra and the team there. And for those of you in Philadelphia, some of you may be familiar with myself and Beth McGinsky. So welcome, first of all, to our webinar today. We're really excited about the topic. Let me just, for those of you who are not familiar with the MBDA Care Center and the purpose we serve, our focus is to provide training, education, consultation, and advice to businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19, and really thinking through how do you recover optimally through that and plan for, so that you can sustain and position your businesses for more long-term growth. That's really the purpose of why we're here. And we want you to reach out to us and kind of engage with us with the areas that you need. And this topic of supply chain is one area that we know is a need for many of our businesses. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it off to Chiquita Jones to introduce our call and our presenters today. Chiquita?
Thank you so much, Blessy. Good afternoon, and thank you again to all of our webinar participants. My name is Chiquita, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. The webinar today is designed to help minority and small businesses deal with supply chain challenges that have been brought on as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our presenters today represent three industries hit especially hard during the pandemic: manufacturing, grocers, grocery distribution, and construction. Today's guest presenters represent each of these fields, but specifically will share information that can be generally applied to other areas. Today, our guest speakers are Mr. Chuck Spangler. And Mr. Spangler is president of the South Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership with over 30 years of experience in a variety of industries. Chuck has been with the South Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership for 26 years. In his current role as president, he develops strategy, manages the organization's $8 million budget, and develops new programs to promote growth. Chuck has assisted thousands of small to medium-sized manufacturing companies throughout South Carolina and the United States in improving their operations and performance. Our next presenter is Mr. Scott Case, who is Senior Merchandising and Procurement Manager with DeBruno Brothers. Scott has over 15 years experience in the specialty food industry, starting out in 2005 with DeBruno Brothers, and then luckily spending 3 years in Sicily working for over 30 artisanal Italian producers as an export manager, and finally coming back to DeBruno Brothers in 2011 to help expand the business. Scott also oversees all purchasing for DeBruno Brothers, imports, and e-commerce, the central hub for all DeBruno Brothers operations. In addition to managing all direct imports from Italy and France, Scott leads private label development for the company. And then we have Mr. Aaron Thomas, who is the president of Metcon. Founded by Aaron in 1999, Metcon is a Native American-owned, North Carolina-based CM and general contracting business with offices throughout North Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, and Oxon Hill, Maryland. Metcon has over 800 project completions on 12 university campuses, as well as hosts of many public school systems, municipalities, and corporate entities across the Carolinas. Inherent to their Native American culture is a sincere appreciation for the environment, sustainable construction, and environmental stewardship. Metcon is a leader in the development and construction of energy positive buildings. As you can see, we have some gentlemen that are going to be presenting some good information. They have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience, and we hope you enjoy the information that they have to present to you. Today's discussion is going to take place around 4 questions that were posed to our presenters early on. And certainly, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to submit them through the chat room, and then we will address them at the end of our roundtable discussion as they are received. Our first question we're going to ask Chuck to start us off with is, how has COVID-19 disrupted your industry in terms of supply chain?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's glad to be on your webinar today. And just to let everybody know, at SMEP, we help manufacturing companies all across South Carolina. And on a good, decent year without COVID, we work with about 550 companies and do roughly about 600 to 700 projects a year around the state. So when COVID hit, we've had a lot of disaster plans in place, flooding, tornadoes, all that. We did not have a COVID-19 plan in place. We never anticipated something that would hit the entire state. And most of our companies would really wouldn't allow third-party vendors in, so that affected us in a lot of ways. A lot of our consulting projects were postponed or even canceled. We had manufacturing companies calling us, knowing what to do, whether they need to downsize, reduce their staff, go into other markets. The other big thing during the time from March, April, May was really our governor in South Carolina deemed manufacturing essential. So we were sending out letters and helping our manufacturing companies know that they were essential to keep open, giving letters for businesses. So if they were ever stopped, for anything, they had permission to go to work. So that was really different, something we never anticipated. The other thing also was, before COVID, a couple of these things you never heard at the dinner table, or even in the boardroom, and that was like supply chain disruption, global logistic networks, scarcity of people, demand volatility, and reshoring or nearshoring. So a lot of that came up during COVID. So a lot of, and we'll talk about it later, but a lot of positives, came out of, even though this is a very negative, there are a lot of good positive things that came out of it for us. Thank you.
Scott, would you like to add anything?
Absolutely. And thank you again for having us here today. Really excited about this group and what we're going to be talking about today. When the biggest disruption and for DeBruno Brothers with COVID, we have a number of different business units, business channels. We have our distribution center, we have catering, we have retail stores, and we have e-commerce. Right off the bat, the first week of COVID, right around March 13th, with all the cancellations of reservations for the catering department, we lost about $150,000 in sales just that first week. We've been making it up little by little over the past year, but it was a huge disruptor, obviously, to retail and to catering and commissary food service. From a distribution side, we saw a tremendous amount of raw material delays, both from a food perspective, raw ingredients, things like pork, with all the issues that were happening in the Tyson plants and some of the other pork producers and processors around the country. Things like pepperoni, things like salami became very difficult to acquire. We would write orders normally where we'd give ourselves 5 weeks or 6 weeks of lead time for an order to land in our warehouse. We had to give 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and even then we were getting short ship product left and right. The other thing that happened was on packaging delays. A huge issue for us. Our bread and butter for DeBruno Brothers, nationally, some people in the Philadelphia area might not know this, but our core products, DeBruno Brothers products, can be found nationally. There's national distribution for our cheese spreads, our cold packed cheese spreads, and our imported cheese crostini, and some other cheeses, jams, olive oil, vinegars, things like that. So while we have 5 retail stores in Philadelphia, we also do distribution throughout the country. And cheese spread containers, the plastic containers that we were ordering, we bring them in from Germany and France. Those plants were actually also producing the plastic packaging around sanitizing wipes. So all of a sudden, those facilities shifted to producing sanitizing wipes, and they said, hey, the little guy in Philadelphia, don't worry so much about his orders. So it was adjusting to longer lead times. Luckily, we were pretty nimble. We're still a family-owned business. We've been around for over 80 years. And so we're nimble enough that we could look at the supply chain. We sort of saw some of the things coming down the road, and we were able to take some more aggressive positions on inventory, and say, okay, we think that, things that don't have short shelf life or that are packaging materials, let's bring in maybe a year's worth and a year's worth of inventory, and just see, because the demand was all over the place. At a point, you couldn't get tomato sauce, you couldn't get flour, we couldn't keep pasta in stock. People were just hoarding. So between long lead times of direct import containers that sometimes take 8 to 10 weeks to get in, and packaging materials, there's a lot of adjustments and a lot of disruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aaron?
Yes, thank you. So glad to be with you guys this afternoon. I mean, construction is very similar to the first two presenters. It's just different products in our supply chain. So if you think about what it takes to put all the parts and pieces it takes to put a building together, some of the ways that we were delayed were with product delays, products that are in our schedule are on schedule to be delivered, and all of a sudden there's a delay with that particular material. Delays, shortages in craft workers because of different locales, being them with COVID, being folks getting sick from COVID, as well as different areas in the country or different areas that pulled back as far as curfews and people being able to get out and around. Project shutdowns. Some projects have actually been shut down in the construction industry and started back up, some multiple times. And then also all of these things causing increases in cost. If you got the handout that I sent, there's some examples of that that are illustrated. The first one was a large student housing project that we did here in North Carolina. About half of the building was cladded in aluminum panels. And those panels were being manufactured in California. Well, due to that, the restrictions in California, different states having various levels of restriction, that manufacturing company just totally closed its doors for a couple of months. Therefore, we were unable to get those panels, and it caused a delay in the schedule and receiving them. Other delays and shortages in supply chain. Same project. The next picture shows a picture of a typical dorm room suite. Well, we had granite countertops that had been purchased, or in the schedule to be delivered at a certain time, and then all of a sudden COVID hits, and the granite is being mined and the slabs are being cut in China, and that part of China was shut down due to COVID. So again, you had delays. There are also things going on that you wouldn't think about. There's a national appliance shortage. You can see each one of those dorm rooms had appliances in it, as well as many other various supply chain shortages across the industry, and parts and pieces that not just the component, say like a light fixture that you put in a building. The light fixture may be manufactured in an area, assembled in North Carolina. However, some of the components that go in it, they may have been coming from China. We ran into instances like that. And then lastly, all of the shortages and all of the shutdowns have also caused spikes in commodity prices in various areas. A couple of examples of that would be lumber and sheet goods. I think everybody knows what a sheet of OSB is. If you build a house, 7/16 OSB used to be $6-7 a year ago, and now it's over $20 a sheet. So it's a threefold increase. Structural steel has also increased. and electrical components, as I stated, also have pretty big increases. So all of that has wreaked havoc on the supply chain and the cost of building a building right now, all due to COVID.
Thank you very much. That's wow. Now, during this time, a lot of companies have had to find other means of revenue. They've had to actually pivot. Scott, you want to lead us off and let us know how your industry has managed to pivot during the pandemic in order to sustain business?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the successes of 2020 was the development and growth of our e-commerce department. So e-commerce to plan was something like 450 to 500% year over year above plan, and as far as growth goes. We put quite a bit of resources. We were able to reallocate people, reallocate resources from our catering commissary division, which basically shuttered for a couple of weeks until we were able to regroup. We moved some people over there back into our fulfillment center. And then we started looking at products, things like olive bars or anything that was open, self-service. We had to shut down basically in our retail stores and pivot into prepackaged materials, prepackaged products. So that would be anything like pre-sliced meats, prosciutto, salami, pepperoni, like I was talking about before. Anything that was packaged and could be sold by the piece and just scanned at a register or sold online. I believe that that's something that's going to be here to stay, because our consumers are looking for less handling of goods in the store, in a grocery environment, and especially online. Less risk, less exposure. Then the other pivot, I would say, is that while we were probably a little bit more evenly balanced on imports and domestic goods, we've shifted much of our purchasing into domestic suppliers. So whereas we might have a French producer of brie, we're lucky we actually are sort of in a food culinary pioneering renaissance here in the US, where we have really great producers of soft ripened cheeses like brie that are coming out of Wisconsin or coming out of California. So we were able to pivot there and transition things that would take have a longer lead time, to avoid any delays with understaffed, dock workers unloading containers in Port of New York, New Jersey. You don't have to wait 4 or 5 weeks for product to come over on the water, get unloaded, get back to our warehouse, and then get redistributed. We can just order from Wisconsin or California and eliminate 2 or 3 weeks in the supply chain. So things like that, where there were like items and where cost was relatively negligible, or if it might even be a little bit more expensive, knowing that you'd have better shelf life in your warehouse, you'd have more likelihood of orders being fulfilled, we would source domestically. And that's, again, I think a thing that we'll continue to see. So the growth of e-commerce, and then also in our stores, we had done the groundwork for a shopping app for our retail stores, that the pandemic really put us on fast forward for that. Luckily, we had most of the work done, and then this just kind of fast tracked it. So that was another pivot. Obviously, I think you see that in the entire grocery retail environment. Thank you.
Aaron, would you like to add anything?
Sure, we've had to pivot in many different ways due to COVID. Some that'll be here permanently, I think. I mentioned earlier on question 1 about the different materials that were hard to source or delayed, or areas that were shut down. So what we are having to do now is, early in pre-construction, we've got to identify what those materials are. And look at ways to mitigate those delays if we know that they're likely to come. Also mitigate those price increases, and some of those ways may be by making sure that we source domestically, just like it was referred to. Additionally, maybe switching to alternate materials instead of using those metal panels that I referred to earlier. Maybe we had to switch that to brick, which was readily available, and many other examples like that through the entire cost code on all the work breakdown structure of the project. Also, we've had to pivot with respect to safety, making sure our team stays safe, changes in PPE, wearing masks on the project, COVID procedures company-wide, mandatory temperature checks on job sites, enhanced cleaning and disinfecting of offices and job sites. And we're actually doing one thing now we are using a facial recognition kiosk that when all of the workers come into the job site, now they go through facial recognition. It tags them to their orientation and knows who they are. And if their temperature is above a certain level, it flags them, sends us an email, and they're not allowed to enter the job site. So that's one way. And then additionally, I think everybody's is pivoting with virtual meetings, just like we're doing right now. And I think that that's something that will obviously be more prevalent, in the days to come, even after COVID.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yes, for us, we had to convert, a lot of our classes and workshops to virtual training, which we had to do almost overnight. We also went to Zoom and Teams consulting, where we could do that, like we are right now. The biggest thing that really we had to help was our manufacturers convert to making PPEs. They didn't know what markets to go into or how to do it. So we had to go into the plants during this time and reconfigure their plant layouts, set up new lines, that kind of thing, to help our manufacturing companies stay in business. We also really worked very hard to drive demand for the manufacturers that switched over to the PPE. We formed a partnership with the South Carolina Hospital Association, Commerce, and also South Carolina Bio, and formed a website to really connect manufacturers, healthcare providers, with distributors, manufacturers, brokers that had PPE. So we vetted all these suppliers. We had a little over 600 that we vetted for South Carolina that could provide PPE. The biggest thing is we didn't want to see a shortage with anybody in the state. So that took a tremendous amount of work. But we helped several hundred healthcare providers and companies, and also people that wanted to donate, companies that wanted to donate, and individuals that wanted to donate. We would match that up with the healthcare providers that needed them most. So that was a lot of pivoting that we did. We also had to help a lot of those manufacturers with the FDA and CDC regulations to help get things passed so they could get the products into the market. We also developed a COVID-19 handbook for all manufacturers and really any business in South Carolina so they could be safe. We had a lot of doctors and everybody to review it and give us feedback and made corrections. So that was a very big thing we did also for the state. And another thing COVID did that really pushed us was to develop online training that really helped us. Right now, we just help do any courses 24/7, anybody in the state, to help them get the certifications they need. We just put in about 2 weeks ago online where we can help any unemployed veterans or people like that searching for manufacturing jobs. We have certifications now that they can go get through SMEP to help them get jobs. So that was a lot that we did during this time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just as a reminder to our participants, please continue to submit your questions through the chat room. We already have some of you who are submitting some very good questions, which we'll have our presenters address at the end of the presentation. I thank you for your interest, and the questions are very, very good questions. Now, our next question. What do you see or anticipate in your industry for the future? Market trends to prepare for, competitors, innovation, technology. Aaron, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So in the construction industry, the first thing I'd start on would be, the economic outlook. there's two main economists that are pretty much the barometer for our industry, which are the Associated General Contractors and the Associated Builders and Contractors economists. And both of them are pretty much in lockstep about what they think is going to happen with the construction economy. Right now, obviously the vaccine's rolling out, and basically what they're saying in our industry is that until we reach herd immunity, we're looking to kind of have a pretty rough go of it. Jobs are on hold. Jobs are put on the bench. There's not a lot of backlog right now. I think the average backlog for contractors is less than 6 months. However, that bleak outlook in the majority of the market sectors, once herd immunity is reached, once about 70% of the country gets their vaccine, that construction will skyrocket, and we're going to have a shortage in manpower, shortage in materials, and all those same type of concerns to mitigate due to a lot of pent-up demand in the industry. Also, market sectors that'll be up, some will be up and some will be down. If you're in the construction industry and you're building hotels, you're building recreational complexes, you're building office buildings, we all know because of the pandemic, those market sectors are pretty much shut down construction. They're down. However, there are some sectors that are up. If you're in building data centers, if you're building multifamily construction, and there's a strong outlook for infrastructure in the future, those sectors are supposed to be up. And then lastly, one thing that could greatly impact the construction economy this year, albeit whether it's the end of the year, third, fourth quarter, when the new administration comes in, there's likely to be a new emphasis on green building and sustainable construction, solar, green construction, things like that. And they're also likely to do a stimulus package, which typically would include construction spending. And so that could be a big shot in the arm for the industry this year, as well as the new administration moves in, sets their agenda, and moves forward.
Thank you very much. Scott?
Sorry about that. Just had you on mute there. So as far as technology goes, and things that we foresee or anticipate in the future, I think e-commerce clearly is the area, the channel that is going to continue to be just our strongest area of opportunity for us going forward. And again, that's where we've put resources in. We've actually opened up a brand new shipping and fulfillment facility in Southwest Philadelphia that will basically just be handling gift basket production and shipment during the peak holidays. And we'll be moving more of our operations over there. The next thing that we'll be doing is doing more cutting and wrapping of cheese, so that we can basically give the e-commerce customer the retail experience that they would have, that they're missing by not being able to come into the store, or maybe taking a break from shopping in person, or gifting in person, or things like that. So e-commerce is really, I think, probably the biggest area of opportunity. The other thing that we've been seeing, from a huge lift on, is virtual tastings. So again, where you might come into the store and sample and taste, you might come in with a group of friends and buy a bunch of stuff and bring back to your house, or do something with your coworkers. Now we're seeing a lot of corporations, companies, for small groups, large groups, you name it, order 4 or 5 cheeses, shipped to their employees, or their whoever it might be, as part of this corporate tasting, ship it to their home. We provide wine pairings, beer pairings, and all that. And then we actually have virtual cheesemongers. That's one of my favorite terms, cheesemonger. We have virtual cheesemongers who will guide people through the tasting. Try this with this salami, or this prosciutto, this jam, this jelly, honey, whatever it might be. So we give them that expertise and that store level experience in their home, from the comfort of their own home. And we've really kind of honed in on packaging as far as being able to ship with gel packs, with insulated liners. Again, we didn't talk about it before, but that was actually another disruption to our industry. The shipping of vaccines and other test kits and things like that actually really disrupted the insulated liner industry and shipping material, availability. So that was the thing. Again, we took a little bit of a stronger position on. And then the other trends, and things that we see kind of going into the future. I think that the home cook, the home chef, is here to stay. People who are making meals at home, and if you look at some of the largest consumer packaged goods companies, they're shifting their Kellogg's is upping up their cereal production, to like make just tremendous amounts of cereals and meals for heat and eat at home, things like that. So I think that the people who are going to be cooking at home and working from home and all that will continue. So we continue to see. We've launched. We have a hoagie kit. You can actually order frozen bread, sliced meats, all the the trappings. The next thing that we're working on is a pizza kit. So you would basically buy all the things you need to make your pizza at home, and then all you need is either frozen pie crust or what have you. So those are again things that are I don't for the next year and a half. I think that we're going to still see a lot of people shopping online and cooking at home and looking for those ingredients. We're lucky that we're DeBruno Brothers. We sell really high quality items. Some people would say maybe luxury items, but they're still relatively affordable compared to other luxury goods. A great bottle of olive oil is $30. A great piece of cheese might be $10-15 at the most. So you can really spoil yourself and treat yourself with something great without breaking the bank. Thank you.
Hey, and at SMEP, the biggest thing for us is we're seeing additional virtual training going on. We've had for the classes that are more than one day or workshops, or a lot of the manufacturing companies are asking to do virtual or a hybrid approach, which is virtual and in person. So we're seeing a lot of that, and we think that'll be the future. We know virtual will still be there, but there's still a lot of companies that like the hybrid approach. The other big thing as far as technology we're really seeing increasing is artificial intelligence, automation and robotics, cybersecurity, and anything that will help with visibility down the supply chain. All that is going to just be huge. Right now, we're working with 27 Department of Defense companies and cybersecurity, another 27 in another 6 months. The cybersecurity is going to be a very big thing right now. China and Iran and all them are trying to hit our tier 2, 3, 4, and 5 suppliers in the Department of Defense. So we're trying to shore up all across the U.S. All those Department of Defense suppliers, which will roll into other manufacturing sectors, every other business that's really across the U.S. It's going to be very critical. Automation, robotics with the workforce, even with COVID. In South Carolina, the workforce is still a number one issue before COVID, and it still is now. So a lot of things driving that. A lot of companies are looking at automation and robotics, and cobots are becoming an easy thing now, and they're affordable. And so a lot of companies, even down in automotive, aerospace, and all that, down the tiers are employing that. And so they're becoming a whole lot more readily available today, very cost competitive for companies to employ to help their business. The other very big thing we see is shorter supply chains. You heard Scott, kind of Aaron talking about it. It's very critical in manufacturing. Reshoring, nearshoring is the big words that you hear right now. If you can shorten that supply chain, you don't have to have all that inventory, stock outs, that kind of a thing, and it helps U.S. manufacturing and jobs. So we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of companies that are reanalyzing their whole supply chain and making decisions to get better. We see I think we'll see much more improved collaboration among companies. And then also we do see more PPE production, not only in South Carolina, but across the U.S. 90% of that production was in China. Due to this, the COVID-19 has really woken up America and the U.S. Both everybody in Congress is now, hey, this is a serious thing. So we do have a lot more companies that are pivoted and going to be permanent. So when we ran out, we had a lot, like 40 other countries outside of China not shipped to the US because they needed to take care of their countries first, which made sense. So today going forward, we're a whole lot better prepared than what we were in March, April, and May, because we have a lot more manufacturers making that PPE, hand sanitizers, masks, gowns, everything like that. So we'll be more prepared for the future. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Chuck, I'm going to ask you to start off with our next question as well. What are some tips you would provide about managing supply chains in the current environment, focusing on actions business can implement in short order with minimal resources, things of that nature?
That'd be great. Yeah, the biggest thing, like I said earlier, is collaboration with all your supply chain partners is going to be a very big key thing. And when I mean that, a lot of people just talk to their first tier supplier. We're looking at the whole supply chain. From manufacturing, it could go from OEM, original equipment manufacturer, to tier 1, all the way down to, tier 6 or 8 or 10 and supplier. So have that collaboration and also have the visibility so you can make really good decisions really quick on demand, because demand volatility has been up and down. That'll help you tremendously right now. The other thing with that is find local suppliers, like Scott and Aaron kind of talked about it, speed to market. And the biggest thing, other thing, tips is we see too much in manufacturing, especially the smaller to medium sized businesses, is they don't have enough customers. I know it's easier said than done, but diversify your customer base. So a lot of them we see may only have 2 or 3 customers that represent, majority of their business. Hey, diversify. The other big thing is that we see a lack of all across the United States, just not only in South Carolina, and this is from very large Fortune 500 companies to very small, is they do not have a strategic supply chain plan. And so for us, what we're really, develop a strategic supply chain plan that includes e-commerce, risk management, your total cost of ownership, and it builds in flexibility and resilience. So you can, when something like this happens, you know how to respond very quickly. And the other thing is we like to see is focus. Too many companies manufacturing wise across the US and in South Carolina, supply chain has not been a big issue, but 50 to 70% of all your costs are in supply chain. And so if you really want to help your company's bottom line in future, you really need to focus on that. So those are just some things to get going right away that we think would be very beneficial to everybody, just not manufacturers, but also people in the food industry and everybody.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. Aaron, would you like to join in on that?
Sure. So, very similar with the construction supply chain. And I spoke to this a little earlier, but, have very early conversations with the entire supply chain, not just our subcontractors, but also understanding where their materials are coming from. So getting on down into second, third, or deeper tiers to understand about the volatility of the supply chain with respect to material availability and also pricing, and then couple that with in pre-construction with making sure that we use materials in the design, suggest materials in the design, or that we know that the increased lead time can be accommodated in the project schedule, and it's also the increased cost if they decide to stick with that same material. Additionally, I think I would just say for all of my fellow contractors and trade contractors that are on this webinar, we need to also make sure we understand what our contracts say with respect to COVID-19. Does your force majeure clause in the contract that you have with the owner you're working for, does which is an act of God causing a delay on your project, is COVID-19 a permissible excuse under your force majeure clause? We need to make sure that it is, and also understanding on down through the tiers what your contract with your subcontractors and suppliers say with respect to COVID-19 as well. And it is different now that COVID-19 is here. You didn't know about it before, but when you sign new contracts after it's already here, there's a lot of arguments being made that that you knew it was here, so you needed to plan for it. So I think that all of our construction folks, and really, I guess, folks across all industries, need to understand contractually so that you can mitigate your risks appropriately with respect to issues from COVID-19.
Thank you very much. Scott, you want to chime in on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think both the guys, said it already. I'll beat the drum again. Network supply chain is huge. I'll give just an anecdote of what happened with us. Again, it's probably our cheese co-packers. So we don't necessarily cut all the cheese ourselves. We just don't have the facility and the labor to do it. So we worked with a converter in New Jersey. They had a COVID outbreak and they had to shut down. So all of a sudden we were left without production for a couple of weeks. Now, luckily, I've been in the industry for about 15 years. I, attend our trade shows, travel with, people in the industry. So we were able to reach out pretty quickly and identify a couple of very, very quickly and fast-tracked approve some secondary, tertiary suppliers, some conversion facilities to get back up online. But that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have the networking, if we didn't have the relationships that we did and that we maintained through the industry. And those are, someone had asked, in the chat a question about, a supplier and suggestion about suppliers. Those networks and those relationships don't happen overnight. It's not something that you can automatically turn on a switch and say, okay, I've got this great network. I can go through my Rolodex and find somebody. But the one thing I would say is, ask questions, reach out, whatever industry you're in, unless it's like the most cutthroat industry, 9 out of 10 times I find that people are more than willing to help out. And that was the thing that really was very, it was reassuring about that we were going to be okay. We launched a program called the Victory Cheese Box, a national program that was basically just a way to reach out to cheesemakers that were struggling. All the food service business that was lost when restaurants shuttered or were reduced to 25% capacity or what have you. Think about all the cheesemakers that lost all of that business. And then they still have cows that need to be milked. They still have goats or they still have sheep. So we created a Victory Cheese Box, kind of like the Victory Garden, concept. And we said, okay, every retailer across the country is everyone who can ship, e-commerce gift boxes. We weren't competing with each other. We just said, here's our customer base and we're going to do this. And if you got a customer base in Michigan, you got a customer base in California, whatever it is. So that was the network, the supply chain, the ability to work together and kind of, it's a cliche maybe, but to lift all boats. That was really the thing that was very reassuring. And then the other thing that, again, this is more specific to my industry. We focused a lot where there was a lot of volatility in the supply chain, a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily, you couldn't necessarily predict what was going to happen in 6 months or in 8 months or 10 months. We took stronger positions on inventory that had better shelf life, so that would last for a year or two. And we cut back on things that were a little bit more luxurious. I used the anecdote before about the French brie, but things like brie, things like goat's milk cheeses, things that were more highly perishable, mozzarella. We took a more conservative approach where we would have been a little bit more aggressive in the past on our inventory position, and we were able to manage our shrink or our waste, pretty effectively. So I think understanding, balancing out your product mix, taking a longer term look and saying, okay, I need these dollars to stretch. Where are my dollars going to be best spent, and what's going to be, what am I going to turn back into capital, into cash, down the road, and what do I have? What am I at risk of throwing away? Making those decisions are kind of key, and I think that really helped our business through this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was some very good, very useful information that I'm sure that our participants this afternoon can certainly take back to their own places of business and put into place. That concludes actually the 4 questions that we had, and I am now going to turn this over to Blessy, and she is going to address the questions that were received of us this afternoon. Thank you so much for your attention, ladies.
Thanks, Shakita. So I'm going to jump right into questions to all of the panelists. The first question comes from, I believe it's Dennis Renas with Expectus Inc. And the question is, how did your companies deal with or compensate the significant increase in freight costs, especially international, ocean or air? Can anybody share some feedback around increased freight costs?
So, I mean, from a food service perspective, I can talk a little bit about it. We saw roughly 14% increase in ocean freight, especially towards the end of the further along into the pandemic. So what happened, just for anyone who's interested, the biggest issue that I saw in freight and ocean freight for food service was there was pandemic hits, restaurants shut down. All of a sudden, there's a glut at the port of containers for restaurant groups that have ordered product that have nowhere to go. So all of a sudden, number one, you saw this backlog of containers in the ports. And number two was became very difficult to find cold storage facilities to offload product. So both cold and frozen were just, all of a sudden it was like the hottest commodity. You put all your seafood into a frozen container and hopefully when you can reopen, you can get it back out again. So we saw about a 14 to 15% increase, in the last, really it's been the last 3 or 4 months. And we're lucky enough that for the most part, we can either absorb it or pass some of it along to our customers. We try to take a look, like everything, where the market will bear. So you kind of have to look out there and say, okay, this is a unique product to us. There's no one else who does anything like it. We can increase our price. Maybe we'll split the difference or go up 10%. This is something where there's a lot of competition. We might absorb that freight increase. So you really have to understand your business and kind of take a look at the marketplace and see what other people are doing. But yeah, it's ever changing. I mean, and right now, especially on imports, the dollar is pretty weak. We mostly are working out of Europe, so the dollar to euro, I think right now is trading somewhere around like 1.25, something like that. So this is the weakest it's been in a few years. So that also contributes to added cost of goods. So freight delays and cost of goods, it is driving up prices for sure. And it doesn't help to be in a trade war and have additional tariffs added on. So, those are kind of like triple, quadruple whammies that are happening simultaneously. And then again, that sort of, it drives some of the decision making, and some of the hard cuts might be made for you, right? Where you say, hey, you know what? I have a diverse product mix, and I've got this one product where there's a 25% tariff that's being included on top of, over the top. Our freight is going up 15%. The lead time is now from 6 weeks to 8 weeks. By the way, the supplier still wants to be paid in 30 days or 60 days. They don't care about the delays in that. So all those things come into play, and you've got a lot of hard decisions to make. So we've made some cuts, and we've bolstered our inventory with things that could be bought more quickly, last a little bit longer, and are made more domestically.
Thanks, Scott. The next question is from Sherry Kelly with C. Kelly Trucking. Can you give me any advice on the trucking or hauling or some leads to keep my hauling scope of work going due to some projects being canceled or delayed? Any advice from Chuck or Aaron?
Yeah, so Unfortunately, I don't have a lot to add to that. I know, I'm not sure if the DOT is where you do a lot of your work. I've heard of some pretty substantial DOT projects. I'm not sure where you're located. I know there's a couple large projects, DOT projects that have been approved. I'm just not sure about when the rollout is. I know one near my headquarters here. They're going to widen I-95 from the North Carolina South Carolina line all the way up north to uh, Fayetteville, or maybe all the way to 44 lanes on both sides. That's going to be a major project, but I'm not sure what part of the state you're in or exactly when that's coming online. But I know federally, there's also an infrastructure. I know that the president stated that an infrastructure bill is going to be one of the first things that he does. And if you look at what they did previously, when they, in the Obama administration, when they rolled out their economic package in order to try to bring us out of the depression, construction was a big part of it, and a lot of money went to DOT, which would translate into trucking and hauling. But as far as right now, I'm just not sure what is out there right now, because I just don't do as much of that side of the business.
Basically, I would just give the advice, based on what the industry and everything that you're in. I know in manufacturing, logistics is big time right now, especially in South Carolina. If you'll go to your state, like your Department of Commerce in South Carolina, there's a group, South Carolina Council on Competitiveness. They have a logistics, and they're always looking to help logistics companies in the state, help them make sure and connect them with manufacturing the needs in the state. That's something I would look at. I don't know if that's everywhere in every state, but I know in South Carolina it is. It should be. But I know logistics and finding truck drivers and everything, there's a big shortage now.
Thank you, Chuck and Aaron. This one is for Scott, and I know you've addressed some of the tips in general, which probably is relevant for new businesses, but the question is, what advice would you give to a catering business that is opening during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I direct messaged Rita as well. I'll tell for the group, I like Aaron said, I don't have a lot of direct management of catering, but I work pretty closely with the catering director. And I think the one thing, the biggest shift, or the biggest pivot that we made is, in the past, you probably have a minimum of, I don't know, it was like 12, 15 people for a catering event. And we've limited that to like single households, or reduced it to single household, I should say. So that opened up the business quite a bit. And we had, historic Thanksgivings and Christmases. So if you have the infrastructure, if you have the capability, the challenge there, you're trading orders for, all the other logistic costs. So again, I would suggest you do you need to do that work and figure out, how much does it cost for each delivery and how spread out are your customers and things like that. But, the traditional model for catering, is probably something that needs to get thrown out the window if you're going to be successful during the pandemic.
Thank you. Another question we have is, predicting a pandemic was beyond the scope of many businesses. However, looking back, which business processes should have been in place prior to 2020 that you realized during the pandemic?
I'll take that one. The number one that we're seeing is really risk management. It's a huge thing right now in manufacturing and everything. But people should have been, and companies should have really had that process in place in case something hit. They had different, suppliers that they could go to in case something like this hit. We didn't see that, and that's one thing I think is critical, and more companies need to do today.
And I just add on to that. I think that, probably in all industries, just like ours, we initially always thought that we needed to be in person in every meeting, and we really never utilized virtual meetings like we're doing today to the full extent. But now that we are actually doing job site meetings, weekly meetings, bi-weekly owner architect contractor meetings and, in-depth reviews of, plans, specs, submittals and things like that. Now that we're doing things like that online, I think we're learning that technology is advanced to such a point that you can really do a pretty good job at a lot of those meetings, thereby cutting down on travel cost and gas and being able to get more done. And I think that's something that is here to stay. For some meetings, you need to be there in person, but we're learning that we could have done a lot more in the past virtually, and I think we will be in the future.
Great. We have a few more minutes left, and we do have to wrap up with some announcements here. Let's see. And I might need a little bit more clarification from Sandra. The question was, do you have any advice on the plumbing and energy efficiency? It was a general question. So Sandra, if you're still on and want to clarify a little bit more what you mean, that would be helpful. Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Can you clarify your question a little bit further in terms of what specific advice you're looking for in terms of plumbing and energy efficiency?
Well, we do I own a plumbing and we do construction as well, heavy highway construction, but that's been kind of slow. I know these are the slow months anyway for construction, but we've been doing our plumbing. We do residential and commercial, and we have been kind of slower since the pandemic, but the energy efficiency, does anybody know anything about where that is going? Because we do like weatherization. We work for the state of South Carolina doing that with the community action companies, but it's federal. And I'm just trying to see if anybody has any ideas of where the industry is going forward now. As far as we weatherize homes. We do like it's just making your home tighter. It's just have a lot to do with energy. So I'm just trying to see if anybody know of any, new things that's coming up with that, pertaining to that industry.
I'll take that. I think there's going to be a lot of money spent in that type of work. I mean, if you go back and look at, so Biden was in charge of the recovery. He helped create the plan and kind of led that effort under President Obama's administration to come out of the depression. And the way they did it was, with respect to construction, they did put a lot of money out in the economy for construction, and a lot of it was tied to sustainable construction. And so I would imagine, based on some of the goals that have been put forth and some of the correspondence and memos I've seen from the AGC and ABC, there's going to be a lot of work rolled out as part of this next economic stimulus package and infrastructure package that's got to do with sustainable construction, green construction, weatherization, and energy efficiency. So if you're in that spot, it might take a little while for them to get it there, but I think there's going to be a lot of work out there in that sector.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's good to know.
Thank you. I think, Scott, I'm not sure if you addressed this already directly with Peter, but there was a question about any advice for finding a consistent bulk ingredient supplier. I think they've had a lot of later missing.
I think Peter's gonna reach out to me specific. I mean, it's without being specific. I could probably point him in the right direction. We definitely buy quite a bit of bulk. Also, I mean, if anybody's on here and isn't aware of the resource, Specialty Food Association, which we are members of, and actually Emilio, who's one of the owners of DeBruno Brothers, is I believe currently the vice president. I don't know. I should know. He's Specialty Food Association is a national association of specialty food manufacturers, retailers, and anyone in between. And they're a great resource. Their website's a great resource just for searching for, they will list members. You can type in, if you're looking for specific products, you can search for those specific products, and then they'll give you a list of members as well. And you can contact through the site. So that's a good place to start for anybody who's a food manufacturer.
Great. So we are up on the hour here. I do want to wrap up. Just to wrap up here for everyone on the call, we have recorded this session. We will share that out with the team, with everybody who attended, and just please be looking out for that. Just to wrap up here, we did want to let you know about, as many of you probably have heard, the new PPP round is now open. It was open for first-time borrowers as of Monday, and second-time borrowers as of Wednesday, as of today. And so just to let everybody know, we do have 2 training sessions coming up, one for the Philadelphia or surrounding regions. It's open nationally, but you can, it is led by the Enterprise Center. So this is the information up here. We'll be having our call Friday, January 15th. Our first session from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. for small businesses with employees. And our second session will be from 1:15 to 2:15 p.m. for small businesses without employees. The content of the application is slightly different for those situations, and that's why we're having those 2 sessions. And now I'll hand it off to Chiquita to talk about the one coming up for the South.
Thank you very much, Blessy, and thank you to our presenters this afternoon as well. Just to let you know, for those of you who are in the Southeast region, there will be what we're calling the Ultimate PPP Workshop via webinar, and that is going to take place Thursday, January 21st at 4 p.m. in this basic same format. And I will actually put the link here for you as well, and it will take you to directly to registration. And if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to email. Other than that, I want to thank you all for participating. This has been wonderful information. Thank you so much to our presenters, to Chuck, to Scott, and Aaron. We certainly appreciate your time, and we hope that all of you have gained some knowledge, something that you can take back to your places of business and put some of these practices in place. Thank you so much for attending the webinar this afternoon. If you will hang on for just a couple of seconds, I will put the link up here for the Southeastern region to participate in the Ultimate PPP Workshop next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Everyone. And for those of you,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you. See you, Scott. See you, Chuck. See you, Aaron.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too. And for attendees who are still on, we also posted the link here for the PPP workshop that's coming up this Friday as well. And Chiquita just added the PPP workshop on Thursday next week for January 21st. Great. Well, hang on for a minute here so that if you click on the link, it'll populate the page for you. My recommendation is that you bookmark that page so that you have it for later, just in case your browser closes out or something like that. You can save it and have it available for you.
All right. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all have a great
Thanks.
afternoon.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Chiquita.
Thank you.